Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Dennis Madsen. I'm former CEO at REI, founder of the Youth Outdoors Legacy Fund, and an enthusiastic supporter of Bold Gold. Before we get going this afternoon, I'd like you to all stop for a minute and pause and reflect on that experience, one of the first experiences you had in the outdoors, and the impact that it may have had on your life to where you're at today. For me, it was a combination of influencers. It was Camp Workala, a well-known outdoor camp here in Seattle, Washington, run by the YMCA. It also involved my family, church youth activities, and the woods behind my house. You all might add other organizations to that list. It could be the Girls Club or the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, or a number of other outdoor organizations around the country. All of them molded you into what you are. It certainly did for me. I like to say that I learned how to read, write, and do arithmetic in the classroom, but I learned how to behave and act in the woods behind my house and the playground. With all the turmoil that's going on today in our country, you may despair or be discouraged. Is this ever going to end? What's our path out? But let me offer a few words of encouragement. I just finished reading a book written by Robert Putnam called Upswing. In that book, he profiles trends in our country for the last 125 years. And one thing came through in that book to me, and I think most readers would agree: you don't get long-lasting change by trying to convince adults otherwise. Long-lasting change is founded on convincing a new generation, letting their values, their desires, and their hopes come through. That's how change will ultimately happen. And that's exactly what we at Bold Gold are attempting to do. Now, let me give you a little bit of a brief history before we turn this over to Courtney Hebert, and you'll be hearing from her more in a minute. In the early 2000s, a couple of Seattle entrepreneurs, Craig McKibben and Jane Seibel, poured their heart and soul into introducing kids to the outdoors. Craig did it through a boys' outdoor leadership development concept to take boys into the Cascades to backpack. Jane founded Passages Northwest to utilize the outdoors to have influence on young girls. Through their passion and dedication and the support of family and friends, both of their organizations blossomed. Then in 2011, we hit an inflection point. Both Passages Northwest and Bold joined forces and were housed in the Seattle YMCA. Now, Jane and Craig remained enthusiastic supporters of the program, and with the contributions from a number of philanthropists in the area, to include Doug and Maggie Walker, Craig and Sarah McKibben, the Youth Outdoor Legacy Fund, the North Face, REI, Young One, and a number of other companies in the outdoor industry, Bold Gold came into existence and was sustainable. At that point, we asked ourselves the question, can we apply this outside of the Seattle area? Are the concepts and is the programming viable and otherwise around the country? After all, we're established in an organization that has hundreds of locations throughout the country. Well, we proved that we can expand beyond Seattle. We're now in 21 Ys across the United States, largely due to the tireless effort of the team that Courtney Hebert has put together. So we are exactly where we hoped to be, bringing this program to more and more youth across the country. So with that brief bit of history, it's now my pleasure to introduce Courtney Hebert. She is the national director of our Bold Gold program now, and ever since 2017, has focused all of her time leading our national expansion, building teams, and creating partnerships. Courtney, take it away.
Thanks, Dennis. Hello, everyone. And I just want to say, I really appreciated that uplifting note. It is important to remember, I think, that we are being progress, even if it isn't always linear. So let's have a brief overview of our time here together. All right, so I'm going to spend a few minutes sharing how we got here, what we've achieved, what we've learned, especially during the pandemic, and the role that Bold and Gold can play in addressing some of the big issues we're seeing in the world right now. Then we have a few members of our community who will share more about the program from their perspective. They're the ones who are really making this work possible. And you'll have a chance to ask them questions, engage with all of us, and join the conversation. So feel free to submit any questions you have in the chat box throughout the presentation. Okay, let's get to 2020. So in a typical year, Bold and Gold is in about 20 different Ys, serving over 1,000 youth each summer. Roughly half of our participants identify as a person of color. A third of our participants are on very significant scholarship. A third are paying full price, and a third are somewhere in the middle. And for most of them, it's one of the highlights of their year. But in the summer of 2020, in the heart of lockdowns and the realization that the pandemic wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, 427 youth still went on Bold and Gold adventures in 3 different Ys, including a brand new location. So each Y ran things a little bit differently, but the thing that was consistent and really truly motivates me is that among all of them, youth told us that this program made all the difference in their lives. It helped them deal with depression and feeling hopeless. It helped them have faith in themselves and the world again. And it wasn't just a highlight, it was literally the reason that they got out of bed in the morning. So I mentioned that I talk a little bit about how we got here, and let's go to the next slide. As Dennis talked about, Passages started in 1997 and Bold started in 2006. And one of the unique aspects of both of those programs is that they were started to create and address the needs of young people. Passages was started because of the decline in confidence and grades among girls once they hit middle school. And Bold was really designed as a place for boys to find resiliency and connect in healthy ways. They were programs designed by people who wanted to take action, wanted to be part of solving the problems they saw in the world. And I think those roots in action and making a difference are really important. So Jane is with us today, and you'll hear more from her on the panel. And the first Bold trip was led by Craig McKibben, who Dennis talked a little bit about in his introduction. They went to Mount McDaniel and just had an amazing time. So we took the best elements of both of those programs and created Bold and Gold, a unique model that really could spread across the country. But since it began in Seattle and our largest program is still here, it accounts for about half of all of the youth on Bold and Gold programs. They also continue to serve as an innovation lab for us, testing and generating new ideas and new ways of doing things. And the Y of Greater Seattle is our home base for members of the national team as well. But let's get into our impact. So unfortunately, things really haven't gotten easier for the majority of youth since Bold and Gold began. Young people were suffering in the years leading up to the pandemic, as well as they are now. Our society has become increasingly divided. Pre-COVID, 20% of youth were obese, and experts tell us that number has risen dramatically in the past couple of months. Suicide has been the second leading cause of death in young people for a few years now. 20% of public schools have almost no children of color, and 20% of schools have almost no white children. So even before social distancing and the racial unrest that we're seeing today, there are very few opportunities to interact with others that lived, in a different way, that were outside of their social bubbles. And while the outdoors has been shown to be effective in helping young people in particular with physical and mental health, in 2018, less than 2% of national park visitors were Black. But really from the very beginning, both of these programs were focused on bringing together diverse groups of youth in the outdoors to offer an opportunity for young people to see what they're capable of, to understand how they contribute to a group through their unique leadership style. They learn about being a group member, the role of compromise and listening in group success. And while they're learning about their own strengths, they're also discovering how different life experiences shape our values, that others might look at an issue or a problem totally differently, and that how we look or what we dress like doesn't really matter when it comes down to it. What we care about and how we treat others are the true basis of friendship. So some people call this our secret sauce. Our adventures provide the opportunity to overcome doable challenges, things like climbing a mountain or paddling across a windy lake. So for many youth, they either lead lives that are really sheltered and they have no tangible ways to prove to themselves that they're capable beyond video games, which I'm convinced is why they're so popular, or on the other extreme, they're facing huge systemic challenges every day, like living in poverty in an unsafe environment. So the challenges they face are really beyond their scope. So being removed from this day-to-day life allows young people to be a new version of themselves, one that's capable, confident, empathetic, and has a chance at reimagining their future. Being immersed in the outdoors means that youth also have an opportunity to de-stress. Dennis talked earlier about what it was like for your first outdoor experience. It was really different, and so perhaps there were times in it that were really stressful, but there was also probably an element of it that called to you. So every day we lead the groups through what we call solo time, which is a mindfulness activity that they can use after the program as well. They practice breathing techniques and appreciating the world around them. It's a time to connect to the beauty of nature and reflect on their experience. And for those that aren't used to living in a closed group, it's also their time to be alone and rejuvenate. So another element is that we aim to serve the demographics of the communities that we're in. Groups are going to look different in different areas. There's more Hmong participants in Minnesota and more Latinx participants in LA. And as I mentioned earlier, roughly half of our participants identify as a person of color. We reach youth that might not think of going backpacking or canoeing by working with schools and other nonprofits. This also helps us ensure that we have economic diversity in a group, which is different than racial diversity and also important. So we know that if our vision is big enough, which we really want to have impact on a significant number of young people. So we can't do this alone. We need partnerships, and we firmly believe in the power of working together. It's what we ask of our participants, and we really try and walk our talk in the way that we run the program as well. Another key component is that our programs are primarily single gender. So we found that this allows for richer conversations and seeing the spectrum of gender within a single group. Young people have told us that this creates a space where they feel more open to try new things. We allow youth to choose how they identify, and then we also have some all-gender groups as well for those who prefer. But really, adolescence is a time when young people are deciding who they want to be, how they want to interact with the world. It's an incredibly powerful time in life, and having equity baked into a program changes that experience for participants. As they're looking at the messages that they get from society, which is part of our curriculum, when they're talking about how they should look or act and deciding if they agree with those messages, they are also able to develop empathy and courage and confidence through having those conversations. They're looking at different leadership styles, their own and others. And surprisingly, for a lot of them, they find that the loudest or the most demanding person doesn't always make the best leader. So, I've talked about a lot of different elements. Let's look at how we measure these things. So these are the numbers for a typical year and for 2020. Each Bold and Gold site collects participant data and does a survey with youth as one of the last elements of their adventure. Designed by a research specialist, the 22-question survey is really designed to measure a youth's perception of the way that the experience has impacted them. So we don't know what the future holds. I mean, the virus is spiking even as we speak, but we do know that based on survey results and parent feedback from 2020, that young people need to get away and they need to connect with each other more than ever. In 2020, the Seattle Bold and Gold program had 100% net promoter score, which is amazing. That means that 100% of the roughly 250 participants that we had this summer, 100% of their parents would recommend the program to others. That's literally like unheard of in programming. So while we don't know exactly what it's going to look like in different locations, and there's probably government restrictions and health concerns that are going to limit the amount of growth that we might see next year, we do know that the need is going to be even higher. And we've seen an increase in demand for the program from families. And we have more locations that are interested in offering the program. So let's go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about how we decide where to expand to. Our goal is to expand to 12 new locations over the next 5 years and to grow the programs in the existing locations. We've been able to identify what the key success factors are and determine which places have a better chance of reaching their goals based on our past 7 years of expanding the program. We look at data related to the number of young people in the community. We want each Y to be able to serve 500 youth per summer, which is roughly what Seattle is doing now. We also look at the strength of the YMCA. We talk to lots of folks there to see what their level of commitment is and if they have a champion. We look at the weather. Frankly, it's just too hot to backpack in Houston or some other places in the summer. So that's going to make a big difference. We look at factors like access to public lands and wilderness, like how far away is it? We also take a look at the segregation index. So cities might be very diverse as a whole, but very segregated by neighborhood, which to us is an indicator that there's real work to do there. We also look at the philanthropic levels in a community. Will there be support to continue offering scholarships and making this accessible for the long term? We typically offer seed funding of $125K to a Y over the first 3 years. We combine that with intensive oversight and support to get them established. But we need to be able to make sure it's going to last for the long term. And one of the other things that we look at is what is the competition for this type of program? And honestly, this can be the hardest to quantify because sometimes our program is very unique. So unlike traditional outdoor programs such as Outward Bound or the National Outdoor Leadership School, our participants live in the areas that we operate. They might not be looking for a wilderness program. They're often looking at soccer camp or computer coding camp or us. They're looking at a week with the Boys and Girls Club or us. And not everyone sees themselves as a backpacker, but we're pretty unique in our approach that we talk to participants and their families about what are their goals and how can we help them and work with them to meet their goals and their needs. One other important thing that I want to mention here is that sometimes we get asked, why are you based out of the Seattle Y? So YUSA, which is the national governing body, does not operate programs, but they do promote innovative programs that they're hoping to expand throughout the Y. And Bold and Gold is an example of that. But by really leveraging the Y network, we reach youth from lots of different backgrounds. And we allow for flexibility where each local Y delivers programs that are tailored to their community in terms of the outdoor activities, locations, partnerships, and outreach. While our national team provides consistent training, specific curriculum, and support for risk management, as well as shared resources like marketing and fundraising. So this makes for, frankly, a fairly cost-effective way that's really relevant to spread the program. So the national team's ability to focus on standards and activities allows us to lead industry trends, while the sites are focused on running really high-quality programs on the ground. Their feedback informs how we update training and curriculum each year, and it's creating a program that's really relevant to local communities while being visionary in our scope. So let's look at the national team. All right, I focus on creating strategy and vision. Oh, sorry, next slide. I focus on creating strategy and vision for sites across the country. Michael supports the nuts and bolts of how to run programs. Mary's connecting people and organizations that are committed to finding innovative ways to solve problems. Robin teaches locations how to form win-win partnerships and advocate for their community. Keith helps them build the systems and support needed within the organization to help them thrive. And Kurt works to make sure they have the policies and procedures in place to safely operate wilderness programs. We also tap into subject matter experts when it makes sense. UC Boulder work with us in mindfulness and nature. Wilderness Society is a big part of creating our public lands curriculum. And Amber Fife Johnson, who we'll hear from more, is working with us in evaluation. So she's also part of our panel, so you'll get a chance to ask her some questions. All right, next slide. I've mentioned a couple of panelists, so let's get into the conversation. Next slide. These are our panelists. So each one of them represents an element of Bold and Gold secret sauce. I want to acknowledge that there are many, many members of our community that make it happen as well. However, we hope that today, this group will give you a sense of the range of folks and perspectives that go into making Bold and Gold happen. I'm going to introduce each person before I ask them a question. And as a reminder, David is monitoring the chat box for your questions during the live Q&A. So if you have questions, type it in, and if it's for a specific person, go ahead and let us know who that is. All right, let's get started. Jeff. So Jeff is the Vice President of Camping Services at the YMCA of Greater Los Angeles. He oversees 3 camps in the Bold and Gold program. We invited him to the panel to answer questions related to their 2020 summer achievements. They not only made Bold and Gold trips possible, but they grew the program this summer from 34 youth in 2019 to 110 this year. Jeff, we worked really hard to make Bold and Gold happen this summer. Why was it so important for you to give youth this opportunity, and how did you do it?
Well, it actually started as we were realizing we weren't going to be able to run summer camp in any of our camps. And I was having a conversation with my daughter, who is a psychologist, and she said, "Dad, that's horrible. Kids are going to need camp and being in the outdoors more than ever this year. Isn't there anything you can do?" And I just remember kind of feeling defeated, but at the same time, kind of went into a solution mode and began having conversations with people. And we realized that there was a good possibility that in working with our local officials, we might be able to do Bold Gold. And so that's what we did. We started meeting with our local officials and our county officials and just kind of putting it to them. Every time they would come up with a hurdle, then our team would come up with a solution. And in the end, they said, "We can't think of a reason why you can't do it." So we had very little time to really get everything up and running, but it happened. And as we started talking to parents and letting them know that we don't have summer camp traditional available, but our Bold Gold program is going to be running. And when we began to explain to them what it was about and how their teens would have an opportunity to participate in leadership development and challenge by choice and so many of the elements of Bold Gold, parents were so excited. In fact, I talked to one mom who actually was in tears and said, "I can't believe we had given up on having something for my son, and we knew he had to get out of the house." And so we were able to get them registered. But it was great working with the local officials because we had the huge concern of COVID, and we did not want this to be a failure. And so working with them and working with some of the other guidelines that had already been established, we were able to run the program. We ran it for 7 weeks, 18 different sessions, and we were able to do it COVID-free. And so I was very, very excited about that. And one of the bonuses that came out of this summer is we started working with an organization that works exclusively with children who have come from domestic abuse. And in talking to some of their leadership, they said, we were hoping to do something with our kids this summer. We always do in some kind of an outdoor setting, but we don't see how it's going to happen. Well, a very quick partnership was created. And one of the big factors was funding. But a generous donor stepped up and made it possible for us to work with this organization. And we had 25 teens from domestic abuse that participated in 3 of our trips. And they came in with zero trust for adults. Adults had abused that trust. over the years, and they just did not trust anyone. But it was amazing to see throughout the week how these kids, some of those walls started to break down. And on the last day, we took them rock climbing, and talk about trust. They are literally putting their lives in the hands of the adult who's holding the other end of the rope. And so many of those kids, it was so difficult for them to do that. But that night, when they were in an open sharing time, they shared this was profound for them, because it was a first step in that healing for them and recognizing that they can trust people. And so we saw some amazing things come as a result of running Bold Gold. And I'm thrilled that we'll be partnering with this organization next year, and very excited about continuing to grow our program. Thanks, Courtney.
Oh, Jeff, that's a really inspiring story. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to go next to Robin, who also works quite a bit with partnerships. So Robin Childs is the Director of Admissions and Outreach for Bold Gold in Seattle, and she also serves on the national team. Prior to coming to the Y, Robin was with Passages Northwest, but she's she's nationally recognized expert in cultural competency and inclusion in outdoor education. She was a pioneer in looking at how emotional well-being is a key factor in risk management. Plus, she's a rock for nervous parents and an ally for nervous youth. Robin, you see a lot of outdoor programs across the country. What do you think is different about Bold and Gold?
Oh, thank you, Courtney. I think, and we'll hear this, I hear other programs saying this, removing barriers to these curated experiences for young people. And I think what we're doing at Bold and Gold is that we're not only, access does not mean inclusion. We're not just providing financial support or the gear, but we have created a curriculum that infuses inclusion and celebration of differences throughout everything. We know we create a space where we celebrate the differences and see how rich our lives are when we're working together to achieve a common goal. I tell young people and parents that we all want to be accepted for who we are. We all want to feel that we can make a difference in the world, that we have something to contribute. I'll tell them we just want to go out. I want you to go out there and exhale. Exhale, it may take 3 days. I'll talk about the inclusion paradox, that we're all human, that we are uniquely different. There is no one in this world that has walked through the world exactly like you. We are like some people more than others. And as humans, we are wired to want to feel included all the time. And sometimes we can find ourselves getting into a routine or a situation or an environment where we are only with people that are like us, those affinity spaces. And we at Bold and Gold are intentionally forming groups of young people that reflect our society. And that means racial differences, socioeconomic status, household makeup, gender expression, immigration status, and all of our rich societal social identities. And from doing that, we use a financial model where a third that, as Courtney said, are significantly on scholarship, a third are somewhere in the middle, and a third are at the top. I want to tell you a story. I love telling stories. And this is about 2 young men that went out on a bowl trip, Ben and Twee. Ben is from a family of a lot of privilege. His parents wanted to go backpacking. He'd been backpacking before as a family, but never on his own. And they wanted to go on a backpacking trip by themselves. They had heard about Bold and Gold, and this would be the perfect opportunity for Ben to go on his own. But just to make sure that Ben is comfortable, they encouraged a friend to go with him. So Ben had a friend going with him. And then there's Twee. Twee is a refugee. The year that he came to Bold and Gold, he had been in the country for just about a year. He is from Myanmar and from one of the most persecuted groups of people. And Thuy also has a significant hearing impediment, and he's learning English. So his cousin had gone on a number of gold trips, and she had told him about this and wanted him to go. Well, in my admissions process, I went through just taking a lot of care. Are we setting Thuy up for success? He really wants to go on this trip. So we made it possible, and he happened to be on Ben's trip. So the first day of the trip, Ben, I'm passing on the information that I have gained from the check-in and the medication and all of that, and I'm handing that off to one of the instructors. And Ben comes up to me in this little quiet voice, excuse me, I don't want to go. And I said, okay. I brought him, sat him down and brought him away from the group, so because he was about to break down. And he just said he didn't want to go. And I said, well, that wasn't part of the plan, Ben. His parents aren't home. You've got a friend going with you. He did not care. He said, well, I could call his cousin. They live across the street from him. I said, that's not part of the plan. So I was trying to use all the things I could think of to make Ben feel that this was going to be an okay thing for him. So eventually I told Ben about Thuy that was on his trip. I didn't mention anything about his hearing impediment, but that Thuy didn't have any friends going on this trip and that he was new to the country and if he would just give it a try. So very tentatively, Ben got back into the gear check circle and went on the trip. And he looked like a deer in headlights. He was petrified. Well, when he came back, I checked in on them. You know, when I go into the office, I'd ask the instructors, how's he doing? How's he doing? And the course director, and they said, no news is good news. So when they came back, I was there, and I just gave the thumbs up, and Ben had the biggest smile on his face ever, 2 thumbs up. Well, he and Thuy became friends. Those two would have never met one another probably in their lifetime. And because of Ben's position in the group, the whole group rallied around Thuy. They had an amazing experience. Thuy learned that he could be accepted for who he was. Ben learned just take a risk and you can make anything happen. I think that's, the intentionality with which we create these groups, create just these amazing experiences for young people.
Robin, thank you. That was such a great story. I really appreciate your perspective and the work that you do. Next, I want to go to Amber Fife Johnson. She's a pediatrician and epidemiologist working at Washington State University's Institute for Research and Education to Advance Community Health. This past summer, the Seattle Bold and Gold program was part of a pilot study to examine the impact of Bold and Gold on resilience, stress, and well-being in youth. Amber's innovative research has looked at the impact of outdoor programs on underrepresented communities as well. So Amber, you became aware of Bold and Gold when one of our staff applied for a research assistant position with you, I believe. What about the program sparked your interest and wanted you to think about working with us? And how do you hope the program advances your research?
So I think the conversation with my now current research assistant was just serendipity and just such a wonderful moment where I learned about Bold and Gold. The premise of the work that I do is founded on equity, that I'm really interested in doing research that improves the lives of marginalized childhood or pediatric populations. And secondarily, I'm really invested in partnering with organizations who are already doing amazing work. I spent a lot of time in school learning lots of different things, but I'm not you guys, right? I don't do what you do, and you do so many things so incredibly. So when I was talking, I was actually when I was calling her reference, and he was telling me about the program. My heart skipped a beat. I got so excited because there were just so many things that aligned: the equity perspective, the tailoring that your different programs do based on where they're located, the partnership that the Bold and Gold program really embraces, just really aligned with my value system as a researcher. So we kind of brainstormed. Courtney and Jeff were both really receptive to kind of having some nitty-gritty research conversations, and we got kind of a pilot study called READY, which is Resilience and Equity, assessing disparities in youth, to just really kind of pre-post Bold or Gold trip to examine resilience, stress, and well-being, and if those three domains have changed over the course of a Bold and Gold program.
I really, I've really appreciated the way that you have helped us think about developing those data points to really demonstrate the experience that we know happens. And yet at the same time, if you're not there seeing young people come back from their experiences, you don't always know exactly what that kind of impact looks like. And I think that the impact has been one of the things that has really been the thread throughout the program from the very beginning. So Jane, let's go to you next. In 1997, you co-founded Passages Northwest with Annie LaRue, the program that has since become Gold. And I understand that you saw the decline in girls' self-confidence as they reached middle school, and that was really impetus for you to begin this work. So what were your dreams for Passages at the time, and how do they connect with what Gold is doing today?
Thanks, Courtney. Yeah, so Annie and LaRue and I met, and we both had read a lot of the research about girls losing their voice, is kind of the terminology at that point, that was a really strong message. And we both put our heads together. She came from a creative arts background working with girls. I came from a science, sort of inquisitive, looking at nature, peace and science education, and we brought it together, seeing that there was a niche out there. There were a lot of physical programs like Knowles and Outward Bound, but none of these outdoor programs that looked at what we then called the three courages. And our dream really, though, to back up a moment, our dream was exactly what Robin's talking about, right? All the stories that I hear over and over again of youth going through the programs, coming in one place and leaving in a whole other place of how they think about themselves. But backing up, I'd like for you to envision for a moment that all those brainstorming sessions that you've had where you have Post-its, right? You're given, brightly colored Post-its, you write your ideas down on each Post-it. Well, that's exactly what Annie and I did for our dream, right? We knew we wanted to give girls a voice and use the wilderness and working together as a way to do that. But we sat down with all our ideas, we grouped them, we separated them, we threw some out, some were duplicates, and we came up with 3 pillars. We called them courages. So creative courage, physical courage, and inquisitive courage. And through those courages, we developed activities. We knew that we wanted an overarching goal of having the third, of bringing girls from all different communities, different experiences, different backgrounds, different families together. And going through what sometimes can be really challenging, hard work of group dynamics, but setting a safe space for that where the girls could explore it, they could use different mechanisms to do that, and perhaps they were attracted to the program because it was artistic or because it was the physical part or the science part, but we were hoping that they came out feeling like they could look at their identity in all those different ways. So there's a sticker that I still have on my desk that I love from Passages Times, and it says, "Find yourself and go there." And I think that really captures the program, giving girls and now boys the opportunity to find themselves in a certain environment, to depend on each other, and to go there, to have the opportunity to really dig deep and then blossom into who their voice is, to really find that. What's ironic when you ask what were our dreams, if you look at the old logo, and I found an envelope with us, I don't know if I can, with this background, I can't really do that. Sorry, the background is hard, if you can see that or not. It was a calligraphy of passages. in calligraphy that a designer did for us. And then we said, we want Northwest on the bottom, but in smaller print, so we can take it out and put in Southwest. We can take it out, we can put in Northwest. We can put in wherever we are going. So we did on that floor with those Post-its have the dream of taking it elsewhere. And so to see it now go national, that was our dream, right? You do a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a 15, a 20. You know, we knew this was far, far out, but it was our dream to have that happen. And the other dream, when I think about that, was the logo, that's a concrete piece. The dream of that sticker of find yourself and go there, that was really our dream for all these girls, no matter what their background and their experience and their circumstance, to have this opportunity. And then the third dream was one, and I didn't even tell Mary about this, but to have a base camp, a mountain camp, a place. I had gone to camp and loved camp, and I wanted that physical environment. And we definitely have that in one sense at the Cascade People Center, for sure, like a home base, a place that Passages Bold and Gold live now. But we always thought we'd have one up in the mountains. And so that's still a dream, is to have a place that you can come and do those things as well. So fingers crossed on that. My last dream, that was not necessarily one that I thought would ever happen. Of course, we were young and we were like not thinking necessarily about families, but along the way, of course, I thought, oh, I might have a girl that'll go on a program. Well, I had 2 boys. So that for a while got put on hold, right? And then with the Bold and Gold, my son this summer ended up going on a trip. So that was a dream that I don't think I ever imagined would happen, and it did. And so that was really exciting to have him go and have still pieces of what we created in Passages happen for him. So really touching my life, that dream coming true there.
Okay. That's great to hear. So thank you. I want to go to our last panelist. Meher Khan is an alumna of 3 gold trips. She went on her first gold adventure when she was just 11 years old. She's now in her 3rd year as a student in the nursing program at the University of Washington. And Meher, you're a success story for gold. You know, you've been hearing all of the things that we hope are happening, and that are dreams for the program, and you've lived it. You've been a part of it. So what was it like for you on your first gold trip, and how has Bold and Gold influenced your life?
Yeah, hi, thank you, Courtney. So my first gold trip was, it was very unexpected. So we had recently, meaning like a few months ago, moved to the US from Pakistan. So it was like our first summer, like year-ish there. And so we didn't know anyone. It was just me, my mom, my sister, and my aunt. And so my aunt, you know, my parents were super excited about all this. We didn't know anyone. School hadn't even started yet. So we were just kind of didn't know anyone here. And so I think my aunt, from one of her coworkers or something like that, found out about these programs. And so I think she contacted Robin, and then was just she wanted us to do something for that summer. And so she was like, we couldn't really afford anything because we had just moved here, but she was still like, you know, she'll do anything, because my aunt is basically like my mom too. She's my mom's sister, so they're my parents. And so she was like, I'll do anything for, you know, these girls to explore this state, this country. You know, I was 11, my sister was 12. So she was like, I want them to like go out there and see, you know, and she doesn't, like, none of us knew what backpacking was. We don't even know what hiking is. Like, we don't even know these words. We're just like, and then so she contacted Robin. And so all she knew, she was just so, I think Robin said that, you know, it's based off of income. And so that we would be able to, my sister and I both would be able to go on this like week and a half long trip free of cost. And you know, the why. And then so my aunt was just so excited about that. She didn't even, like, honestly at that point, she didn't even care like what exactly like we were doing, that she was just so like, she was so excited for us to go on this trip free of cost, like see all these things. And she didn't even know it was a backpacking hiking trip. So when we show up to you know, she's like, my sister and I were like, oh, we don't want to go, like we don't know what this is, like we don't know anyone here, like it was just such an awkward time for us because we were like, oh, and she was like, nope, you gotta do it. So we show up with our huge suitcases per person for like my sister and I, because we thought it was like we were staying at a resort or something. We had no idea. So I had a huge suitcase with like 7-8 days worth of clothes and like perfume and stuff like that. And my sister had the same thing. And we show up and it was like a completely different thing. And then my aunt's super happy, right? She drops us off and goes home. And then, you know, it was a completely different thing. And it was like, oh, we're actually going backpacking. So just, you know, at the you know, all of anything we needed was provided, like hiking boots. We didn't have anything, so everything was provided. And my aunt doesn't know any of this. She just goes home and she's like, oh yeah, like I'm so happy for them, I'll meet them in a week or whatever. So she doesn't know that we're not even actually going, you know, to like wherever she thinks we're going. So when we came back, it was, and I think it was like a week and a half later, and she sees us like, you know, kind of stinky, like wearing the same kind of outfit, like kind of scratches on us. We're like laughing, like we're like this with all the girls on the trip. Like it was my sister and I and like all of those other girls. And mind you, we hadn't even started school in the US yet. So we don't know anyone, we don't know our neighbors, nothing. And then so when we show up, when we come back from the trip, we're all so close. And so my aunt was so shocked to see that like we, you know, and then on the ride home, we told her like we went backpacking, we went camping, we went zip lining, we went horseback riding, we did all of these things that we would have never, like we went rock climbing, like all of these things that we would have never ever been exposed to, like for maybe I don't know how many years. And because of, you know, those initial trips is when my sister was like, okay, you know, her interest, she was really into backpacking for a really long time. She still is, she just got kind of busy. I was, you know, really into backpacking, and you just find your likes and dislikes with things. But yeah, that trip definitely, and my aunt is just so proud of herself, first of all, for like finding, you know, something like that. And also she is in love with like anything to do with, you know, Bold and Gold. She's so proud of me for always, you know, going back to those trips. Ever since that first trip, every single summer it was like, okay, like we would forget about, you know, like we couldn't really afford to go on like trips here and there at all, like throughout the year, especially first few years we moved here. But every summer it was like a guaranteed thing. Like my aunt knew that we would be able to participate in Gold, you know, by contact. It was just like Robin, like just all summer long. At the beginning, whilst like summer was approaching, she'd be like, okay, so I'm gonna call Robin, I'm gonna call Robin, I'm gonna call Robin, like should I ask about whatever trip. So she, you know, and she's like my mom, and she's very proud of me for also, you know, taking a part in such a great opportunity like this, and also is very grateful for you guys or everyone here for supporting in every single way possible. So it's definitely a life-changing experience for sure.
Oh, that's so great to hear. Um, so I have a follow-up question for you. How do you think being a part of these programs has really influenced your life? Has it made a difference other, you know, outside of the summer and having fun, or how's that influenced you?
Yeah, so like a few of you all were talking about earlier as well, when we moved here, we didn't know anyone here. It was just the four of us. And so we were very timid in the first place because, you know, it's like the language issue, and then also like you're just like insecure, you're just at that age where you're just insecure about like every inch of yourself, and you're just like always very, you know, like you're awkward and everything. So like also like just meeting a whole like different types of people on these trips where like you would never, like for example, if they went to my middle school or high school, like I would never, like people, best friends that I've made on these trips over the years, like Katie and Emily and so many other people that I still keep in touch with to this day. Like I was talking to a few of them last week, like people on these trips, like participants, and even like the instructors who are from backgrounds so different from mine, people who otherwise like in a high school setting or middle school setting, like I would have never imagined we would click or be friends or anything like that. Like people, you know, racially different, like in terms of religion, like LGBTQ community, like people from different like financial backgrounds and everything. And then me, like just moving here with, you know, my really small family, just seeing what kinds of different people are out here, and like connecting with them, and just making these really special bonds with them, and just, you know, being secluded with them out in the community, just gives you a really different perspective at that age to the different types of people that are, the beauty and the different types of people that are out there.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we have time for one or two questions. David, do we have any questions that you've gotten?
Yeah, we actually have a couple questions. I have one for Amber. So Greg asks, does nature affect all kids in the same way?
Ooh, great question. Amber, what do you think?
I wish I had a conclusive answer. I am currently with colleagues at the University of Washington and Seattle Children's Research Institute trying to summarize the literature as it stands. So I think there are a lot of studies that have been done, but they are very, very diverse in terms of what age ranges they look at, what outcomes they look at, what types of nature exposures they expose kids to. So I think the most consistent results, which are kind of, I would say, moderate in strength of evidence, not strong, just moderate, is that outdoor time on average increases children's physical activity and also their behavioral and mental health, which I think many people on this call and probably who are attending know intuitively. And I think the rest is really to be determined. So for example, most of the mental and behavioral and health literature is in adolescence. And mental and behavioral health is hugely wide, right? So whether we're looking at resilience or stress or depression or anxiety or suicidal ideation, it really depends. So I'll stop there.
All right, I think we have time for one more question.
Ooh, yeah, that's a tough one. But Patricia Smith actually asked, what do the panelists consider barriers to entry other than economic? What cultural barriers might there be?
Robin, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. I think that there is a misnomer that I'm going to talk about African American folks, that they do not have a relationship with the outdoors, that they do not recreate in the outdoors. They do. However, so much of that tradition has been taken away, and that it looks different than these kinds of experiences that we're talking about. There quite often won't be that tradition of going outdoors with groups of people that are not part of your family. So that cultural barrier is, if you don't see yourself doing this, if you don't see yourself reflected in those ads. I know REI has made significant effort to reflect our community, that people, BIPOC people, subordinate groups recreate in the outdoors. If you don't see yourself doing it, you won't do it. And you look at so much media that's saying this message that nature is out to get you. Why would you want to go out there? You never know you don't know what's around the corner. There is a TV series right now that Carolyn Finney referenced. I haven't watched it, but it's this group, this African-American family traveling across the country from one city to the other. And it's got a horror element to it because bad things happen in the woods. So if there is this tradition or knowledge that bad things happen in the woods, why in the world would you trust your precious loved one, send them out into the woods with a group of people that you don't know that you can trust? So that's a barrier. Another barrier could be a religious barrier, a co-ed situation. You're not going to send your girl out on a trip with male leaders or with boys in that group. When we have that affinity group of young women, women that are people that are expressing as female together. That also, when we do that, removes a barrier. So there are the religious barriers, the nature's out to get you barrier, and the element. So much of our country is telling us not to trust people that look like me. It's hard to learn to trust. So that's one aspect of it. Not having that tradition recreating as we're talking about outside of your family.
Mhm.
You don't let other people teach your kids. I've run into that, especially like in the Ukrainian community. You at this age, you're not going to let someone outside of their extended family group influence their growth at this level.
Thank you for that, Robin. And I want to thank all of our panelists. You had such great perspective and amazing things to say. And you know, what you were talking about, Robin, really reminded me of kind of full circle of what Dennis was saying when we first started, of if you want to have change in the world, you really need to start with young people. That's where we're going to build trust and change the perceptions of what's okay and who we can be close to. So Dennis, you want to wrap us up? More words of wisdom?
Hey, Dennis, you're muted.
Got it. Sorry. Wow. Every time I hear this group of Bold Gold participants, I'm just my enthusiasm and hope is inspired. Your dreams, your energy, your passion, they're contagious. I want to thank you, Courtney, and the team you've built, and the panelists, Robin, Jeff, Meher, Amber, and Jane. You truly are creating a program with secret sauce. Our secret sauce is you all. Very quickly, I'd like to thank Mary, Sue, and Cato from the Y for helping organize this herd of cats. It's quite difficult to put together a Zoom conference like this. It's deceptively simple, but yet it's hard to pull off. Thank you for supporting us through this. I'd like to remind you that Bold Gold is growing. We've got 21 sites. We hope to put in 12 more. And we think that's very possible. How can you get involved? I'm sorry we had to cut our questions short today, but we'll be reaching out to you, and please share your thoughts, your ideas, or your support with Courtney and team as they reach out to you. So for those of you have been involved with Bold Gold, thank you for all you've done to build this organization. And to our new friends, I hope that you leave intrigued by what you've learned and optimistic about the future. Thank you and good evening from all of us at Bold Gold. Be well. Good night.